What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I am your host, and my name is John. And this week we are back with episode 73, where we will be analyzing, predicting, and discussing the betting lines for the UFC on ESPN Plus 15 card headline by UFC Women's Strawweight title fight between champion Jessica Andrade and challenger Weili Zhang. This event will be taking place in Shenzhen, China. The 7-fight prelim card kicks off at 3 a.m. Eastern Time, with the 5-fight main card kicking off at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. There are 12 fights in total on this card, and this UFC card, when you look at it at first glance, doesn't look the best. It has 9 debuting fighters, so it'll take a lot of work to really understand all the fighters and matchups in this card. But let me tell you something, once you do that and you put that effort in and you study all these fighters, this turns into a really fun card with a lot of good matchups. There are a lot of underdogs, plus 200 underdogs that I think have a good chance at winning, and the line movements have been going up and down on all the lines all week in this one. These lines have been getting a ton of action, so we'll discuss the line movements and which underdogs I think have value and all my bets and predictions for how these 12 fights will play out. Now, we do have a Chinese card on our hands, so we have a lot of Asian fighters with a lot of complicated names, so no disrespect to all the fighters. I know they're all listening to the podcast before their fights this weekend, but no offense if I butcher some of these names. So in the first fight of the evening in the bantamweight division, we have Danaa, who is 6-1, taking on Alateng, who is 12-7-1. The opening betting line for this one was Danaa, the favorite, at minus 175, Alateng, the underdog, at plus 135. Right now we are seeing Danaa minus 115, Alateng minus 105. So a lot more action coming in on Alateng. The early action actually came in on Danaa, and Alateng was as high as a plus 190 underdog, and within a few days he's all the way down to minus 105. So massive action coming in on Alateng, and I agree with it. I think that he's the right side in this matchup. I think he will win the fight, and certainly at plus 190 there was a ton of value. Now, getting over to how these guys match up, these guys are actually really similar to one another. They're both orthodox fighters. They both have power in their right hands. Neither of their defenses are too good. Neither of their ground games are too good. But I do give the defensive edge to Alateng, and I give the grappling edge to Alateng as well. I've seen Alateng hit a few takedowns, kept top position, and I've been impressed with Alateng's power a little more. He has dropped a lot of his opponents with his right hand. He's knocked a lot of opponents out, and Danaa has had some trouble with offensive takedowns at one point. His only loss in his career was a fight where he was taken down off of his kicks and taken down with wrestling takedowns, and spent a lot of time on his back, couldn't get back to his feet, and therefore he lost the fight. So on the feet, I think both of these guys will be pretty evenly matched, with just a slight power and defensive edge to Alateng. And on the ground, I think there's a slight edge to Alateng as well, with the grappling, with the takedowns that he's hit, and the top position, and the weaknesses that Danaa showed on the ground as well. I've also been a little suspect of Danaa's defense on the feet, so I really think it's possible that Alateng finds the chin of Danaa early and knocks him out with a right hand at some point. So the pick is going to be Alateng by first round knockout, and this one should be a really fun fight to kick off the card. Next fight in the women's bantamweight division, we have Rosa, who is 11-3, taking on Procopio, who is 6-0. The opening betting line for this one was Procopio, the minus 165 favorite, Rosa plus 125. Right now we are seeing Procopio minus 115, Rosa minus 105. So a lot more action coming in on the underdog Rosa in this one, and I agree with that as well. It's the same exact line as the fight before, and in both cases the underdog got steamed in this one. So these two are both pretty sloppy. I don't think either of them are particularly great fighters, but they both have weaknesses, so it'll be interesting to see whose weakness gets exploited first in this one. So we'll start things off with Rosa. Both of these women are making their UFC debuts. Rosa is an orthodox striker. She's got the better striking of the two, but she's pretty stiff on the feet. She does not throw her punches and kicks too fluidly. She does have some decent success against lower level competition, but I don't think that she will have much opportunity to strike at range and show off her better striking ability, because Procopio is not looking to strike at all. She's looking to get into the pocket right away, get takedowns, and try to get top control and submissions on the ground. Rosa has also gotten offensive takedowns at some points, but she has also been taken down and she's been submitted before. And that's really where it worries me for Rosa in this fight, because she got a takedown on Melissa Gatto and she was in top position, and then she got caught in a triangle and eventually finished with a modified triangle Kimura or something like that. But that was a real bad mistake that she made in that fight, and I think that Procopio has a chance at pulling off a submission when Rosa makes another mistake on the ground in this fight. But there are some good things about Rosa. I think that she has beaten the better competition. She's got more experience, and she's training with Jessica Andrade in this camp, so that's a huge factor. Training with the champion, both have fights this weekend, so that's a huge factor in her corner. And if this fight stays standing, I think Rosa will outstrike her, and maybe Rosa can get her own takedowns. But I think Procopio will be closing the distance, getting the takedowns, and looking to get that submission. And I think this one is due to be a sloppy back and forth grappling fight. And Rosa has been in one of those before. She fought a woman named Paccio, and she was in a back and forth fight where both were getting takedowns, both were in submissions, and eventually Rosa got tapped out with a very sloppy guillotine in that fight. So I'm not impressed with Rosa's ground game enough to be confident that she stops Procopio's submission game. So the pick is going to be Procopio by submission. But if you got in Rosa as an underdog, I still think that's a pretty decent bet, because this is a real close fight, and Rosa is certainly capable of winning it. It is a lower level women's MMA fight, but the pick is going to be Procopio by decision. The next fight takes place in the lightweight division. We have Damir Ismagulov, who is 18-1, taking on Thiago Moises, who is 12-3. The opening betting line for this one was Ismagulov, the minus 405 favorite, to Moises at plus 285. Right now we are seeing Ismagulov minus 180, Moises plus 158, so much more action coming in on the dog Moises in this one, and rightfully so, because that opening betting line was way too high for Moises. He actually got as high as plus 305, which is where I got my first bet of the card locked in on him. Actually, I bet one unit on Alateng at plus 125, I forgot to mention, but I'll go back over them at the end of the card. But Moises at plus 305 is just a ridiculous line, because this is a really close fight, and Ismagulov is the deserving favorite, and I think that where the line is at now is actually dead accurate. I cap Ismagulov minus 175 in this fight, because Ismagulov has very good boxing. He's got a great jab and an overhand right. He likes going to the body with the jab to set up that overhand right, and he's had some success within the UFC so far. He's taken on two lower-level opponents in Gorgees and Alvarez, and he went about those fights in very different ways. Gorgees didn't have a good ground game, so Ismagulov was very takedown-heavy in that fight, and he did land some takedowns, but his top pressure didn't really impress me too much. He did get a few minutes of top control throughout the fight, but Gorgees was able to stuff a few takedowns. He was able to get up from a few takedowns, and Alex Gorgees was able to do that. I think that black belt Thiago Moises will be able to do that as well. So that fight with Alvarez, Ismagulov didn't do takedowns at all, because Alvarez was like 15-1 coming into that fight with all 15 submissions. So Ismagulov must have known that about his opponent, decided to take away any chance he had of pulling off a submission and just outbox him on the feet in a pretty low intensity, low output fight. It was a nice decision win for Ismagulov, but he didn't really take any risks. And I think that we really haven't seen the best of Ismagulov yet, because he hasn't had an opponent who's really dragged the best out of him yet. But I think Moises will be the one to do that, because I think that Moises' takedown defense and jiu-jitsu should be good enough to avoid getting dominated on the ground. I think that if he gets taken down, he should bounce back up within a few seconds, and he can maybe threaten with a submission off his back. But Moises was dominated by Dariush in his UFC debut on the ground. Dariush really showed him that there are levels to the grappling in MMA and was taking him down and holding him down, grinding him out against the cage. And Moises was jumping guillotines and making mistakes a lot in that fight. And Ismagulov has a path to victory. If he goes takedown heavy and Moises jumps guillotine and Ismagulov avoids that choke, he's going to have Moises on his back and he could do some damage and win rounds. That's, I'd say, Ismagulov's best path to victory, because on the feet it's going to be really even. Moises has good straight punches. He's got a good front kick, head kicks. He's a very impressive striker, and Ismagulov has only really shown his boxing so far. He has some decent leg kicks, but nothing too impressive. While Moises, I think, is the much more dynamic striker. So plus 300, there's value all day on Moises. Plus 200, even value on Moises. And I know a lot of people were betting on him at those odds. And even if he loses this fight, it's still a good bet. So I think that Ismagulov has a good chance at hitting those takedowns, avoiding that guillotine, and putting Moises on his back and winning rounds, maybe outstriking him a little bit on the feet. I also think that Moises could potentially reverse those takedowns, stuff the takedowns, and outstrike Ismagulov. So I'm actually going to pick the dog Moises to win this one. I think that he will avoid the takedowns. He showed some good takedown defense in the Hollowbach fight. Not the same level of grappler, but still showed some improvements. He got his feet wet with his first win in the UFC, and I think that he will continue keep the ball rolling, and he'll pick up this underdog victory over Ismagulov in this one. But Ismagulov does have a path to victory. I'd say Ismagulov is the value side of things where the betting line sits now, but I'm really happy with that early action I got in on Moises. So this should be a good fight, and I'm going to pick Moises to get the decision victory upset. The next fight takes place in the light heavyweight division. We have Jung, who is 11-2, taking on Khadis Ibragimov, who is 8-0. The opening betting line for this one was Ibragimov, the favorite, at minus 365 to Jung, the underdog, at plus 255. Right now we are seeing Ibragimov minus 275, Jung plus 235. So lines staying about the same. There is two-way action coming in on this fight. And right off the bat, I'm just going to say that I think there's some pretty decent value on Jung in this one. I do think that Ibragimov should be the favorite, but both these guys coming in here making their UFC debuts. Jung actually has a little bit more MMA experience. Ibragimov coming from that Sambo background in Russia, and Ibragimov's striking at range has been the thing that stuck out the most to me. That's a huge weakness of his. He does not have good straight punches. He does not have very calculated offense. He really just swarms into the pocket with big combinations and power shots. And he likes to get wild in round one. He likes to maybe get hit a few times, to take some risks getting into the pocket. But what he wants to do is he wants to clinch you up. He wants to get you against the cage. And he wants to work his judo throws and his takedowns, because his throws are incredible. He has hit some wizard throws and some judo throws on tape and M1 challenge that have been incredible against really good competition as well. He was getting pushed against the fence the entire fight versus Putz, but he was still able to land the takedowns and do all the damage in that fight, and eventually I think either get the finish or the decision. I'm not really sure, but once he gets on top of you, he has great top control, great ground and pound. I've seen him get mounted crucifix TKOs before, and but the one thing that worried me is if he does not get that takedown, he can look a little desperate. He did this versus a gentleman named Kukhalashvili. He went super hard for the takedowns in that fight, and he looked pretty gassed out for the rest of that fight, and he was not able to get takedowns. His opponent kept getting up from the takedowns, and eventually the opponent was disqualified for grabbing the ropes. But Ibragimov was really putting a lot of energy into those takedowns, and he was not getting them. Now, getting over to Jung, he is a striker at heart, but he's shown some decent wrestling abilities as well. He's defended some takedowns. He's gotten up from takedowns. He actually hit a nice switch on an opponent when they were going for a takedown. So he definitely shows that he's got some experience wrestling, and I'll be interested to see if he's able to stuff the takedowns in this matchup, because that's going to be Ibragimov's path to victory. I think on the feet, Jung will actually be the better striker of the two. Certainly at range, Jung's got the straight punches and the leg kicks to make this a very interesting fight. So if the fight stays standing and at range, I think Jung flat out wins it. He does not have the much one punch power, so it'll probably be an accumulation of punches. But if Ibragimov is going for those takedowns and not getting them, I can see Jung taking this fight over in rounds 2 and 3, maybe even getting a finish as the fight goes on. So I think that Ibragimov probably will get some takedowns because although Jung did have some good defensive wrestling on tape, those guys are not on the same level as a World Combat Sambo champion like Ibragimov. So I think Ibragimov will come in here prepared. I think he will get a few takedowns, but I'm really worried about his gas tank. I don't think that he will be able to keep consistent top control. I don't think that maybe he gets a dominant position and then finishes Jung with a mount of crucifix or finishes him for mount, maybe gets a submission of some sort. That's his best path to victory. But if Ibragimov does not get the round 1 finish, I think Jung takes over the fight. He'll be a great live betting spot if Ibragimov wins round 1. I think maybe Jung round 2, round 3 props could be an interesting thing, but ultimately I think that there's a lot of value on Jung in this betting line. I'm still going to pick Ibragimov to get that victory. I think he will get the maybe first or second round finish, but I think I've already got a bet on Jung because there's just value there. So even if the bet loses, it'll still be worth it. I don't really see a scenario in here where Ibragimov comes out here and looks like a minus 300 favorite, even if he gets that early finish. I just think he's too sloppy. He's not experienced enough in MMA with only about 8 fights. So should be a good fight between two debutants. There's a lot unknown about it, but I'll pick Ibragimov to get the first round TKO victory. The next fight takes place in the bantamweight division. We have Andre Soukhamthath, who is 13-7, taking on Soumajari, who is 11-4. The opening betting line for this one was Soukhamthath the favorite at minus 245, Soumajari plus 175. Right now we are seeing Soukhamthath minus 170, Soumajari plus 150. So more action coming in on Soumajari's way, actually. At one point, this fight was minus 135, minus 105. So a lot more action coming in on Soumajari, and maybe at the price of 150 or above, there's some value. Maybe 130 is the maximum I would bet Soumajari at, but I think Soukhamthath has the skills to win this fight. He should be the better boxer of the two. Although Soumajari does have good striking, he is a southpaw. Soukhamthath used to fight in southpaws. He's fought multiple southpaws in a row now, I think. So Soumajari has that wide karate sanda stance. He has good kicks, good in and out movement, some decent straight punches as well. And Soukhamthath struggled with the kicks of Martinez a little bit, so I think Soumajari's game plan is going to be to keep this one at range, use the body kicks and the leg kicks to upset the rhythm of Soukhamthath and not let him get into boxing range, because if Soukhamthath is able to get into boxing range, I think that he will win this fight. He actually does have some decent power in his hands. He's dropped his opponents before, but the thing you got to be worried about Soukhamthath is always that his fight IQ is really bad. He has some bonehead moments in there. He makes fights closer than they have to be. He has fights that are winnable in front of him and he doesn't take them. He's a little bit chinny as well too. He's been dropped before, and I think that he's a very flawed fighter, and he is struggling to make improvements fight to fight. And we've only seen Soumajari in the octagon once so far. He looks decent scrambling and stuffing some takedowns and sub attempts of Luis Smolka, but eventually was tapped out in the the second round of that fight with an armbar. So Soumajari's real weakness comes on the ground. I think most of his losses have come by way of submission. And Soukhamthath, although he can hit an occasional offensive takedown, he's not really the submission type. I think he will be looking to outbox Soumajari in this one. So it really comes down to who is able to put this fight in their range. Soukhamthath wants the boxing range. Soumajari wants the kicking range. So it's a really close matchup. I see why people maybe jumped on Soumajari at plus 150, plus 140, 130, but I think Soukhamthath's experience, he's got the more fights in the UFC. I think he might be the better, well-rounded fighter. He's fought and beaten the better competition, and I think that his boxing will be the ultimate deciding factor in this one. I think he will outbox Soumajari, maybe drop him at some point with the power in his hands, and I think Soukhamthath will get the decision victory, barring any bonehead moves, which is, a very big if. and when you're talking Soukhamthath fights. But I think Soukhamthath is getting to the point where he should be able to beat an opponent like Mudaerji pretty comfortably. So I'm going to pick Andre Soukhamthath to get the decision victory in this one. The next fight takes place in the middleweight division. We have Anthony Hernandez, who is 6-1, taking on Jingliang Park, who is 10-3. The opening betting line for this one was Hernandez, the favorite, at -230, Park +170. Right now, we are seeing Hernandez, the favorite, at -160, Park +140. So more action coming in Park's way, and this is a surprising line movement to me so far. I've understood most of the line movements so far, but this one's a little bit perplexing because I think Hernandez is the deserving favorite. I think he could be a little bit more of a favorite. I'd cap him in the -200 to -250 range. And I think that he's getting disrespected a little bit because he didn't have the best UFC debut. He was rocked a little bit on the feet by the punches of Marcus Perez. He got dropped by a body kick and eventually tapped out with an anaconda choke. But I think that he has a lot more than what he showed in that fight. I think that Hernandez's ground game is actually way better than what it showed in that fight. He got tapped out by a black belt when he was hurt. That doesn't mean that his ground game is bad. And this was a misconception I had. I wrote down bad ground game in my notes, and I went back and watched some of his old fights, and he's actually a pretty decent grappler. He had a 25-minute back-and-forth grappling battle with Brendan Allen over in LFA. 5-round fight, has championship experience, hit his own takedowns, kept top control. He got reversed sometimes. He hit reversals. He had sub-attempts. He defended sub-attempts. It was a really grinding back and forth grappling match, and he showed good cardio in that fight, and he's really impressed me. That really opened my eyes to the fighter Hernandez is, and I think that exposed the path to victory for him in this fight, and it's going to be his ground game. He's going to look to hit offensive takedowns, keep top position, ground and pound, and maybe submit Park on the ground, because Park's takedown defense has been atrocious. Has shown no ability to stuff a takedown whatsoever. He fought an opponent named Sparv, and he had him rocked multiple times, and he was still getting taken down by sloppy, desperate takedown attempts. He just has no wrestling ability. I'm not talking too much shit on this guy because I think he will be the better striker of the two. Hernandez's striking at range has been a little iffy. He got touched up by Perez at range, and he hasn't really shown me too much striking at range, or really in the clinch at all. His striking has just been overall unknown or unimpressive. He did spend most of round one on the feet versus Perez, but there was a lot of clinching involved in that fight, a lot of takedowns, so we really have no idea how good of a striker Hernandez is yet. But I do think Park will have the better striking of the two. He's got pretty decent boxing. He's got a nice jab. Not the most power, because like I said, he was hurt in a spar multiple times, and he did not get the finish in that one. He coasted to a decision as well. So he showed he could fight the full 3 rounds. He showed he is a little bit disciplined of a fighter. And I think that ultimately Park's ground game, his lack of ground game, will be the thing that loses him this fight. So I think Hernandez will be coming out here looking to close the distance early, not looking to strike with Park too much, get that takedown. And if he is able to get the takedown, I think that Hernandez will run away with this fight, because Park has shown no ability to stuff takedowns or get back to his feet, and Hernandez actually has a very underrated ground game. So if you're thinking the other way on this fight, if you're thinking Park is going to win, I advise you to go watch that LFA fight between Hernandez and Allen, and I think that will change your mind. That championship experience, that hard-fought battle, I think is really going to change your mind. And Hernandez has that UFC debut out of the way. He lost. He learned from that fight, took some time off, and I think he'll be a lot better in this fight. So the pick is going to be Hernandez to get it done. Let's go with by second round submission. The next fight takes place in the welterweight division. We have Kenan Song, who is 14-5, taking on Derek Krantz, who is 24-11. The opening betting line for this one was Song, the favorite, at -135, Krantz -105. Right now we are seeing Krantz, the -105 dog, to Song -115. So there was two-way action coming in on this fight. The early action came in on Song. Krantz actually got as high as a plus 150 underdog, and he's gotten to the minuses the past few days, so the more action is definitely coming in on Krantz's way. I think that's the right move. I've not really been too impressed with Keenan Song so far. Besides his powerful right hand, I really have not seen too much good from him. He got a few nice knockouts over Bobby Nash in 15 seconds and Hector Aldana, but neither of those fighters are very high level. Aldana is a 4-2 fighter. Bobby Nash is no longer in the UFC, and I believe lost all of his fights in the UFC. And he lost a decision to Alex Morono, where he was ultimately just out kickboxed that entire fight and couldn't get that power right hand going. And Song really showed his lack of striking diversity in that fight. He does not have many good weapons that he can go to. And Song's takedown defense has also been pretty unimpressive. He likes jumping guillotines or kimuras or something like that to defend takedowns, but he does not seem to be too comfortable wrestling at all. And he does not check leg kicks very well either. He was getting hit with some heavy leg kicks versus Hector Aldana when they fought, and that really worries me. So getting over to Krantz now, he's not the best striker. He's pretty awkward on the feet, but he throws with massive power in his hands. He's got power in both hands. He's knocked opponents out with both hands over in LFA. He's got some good wins over there. He's has championship experience, has won decisions before, and he did have a tough draw in his debut. He fought Luque on short notice, and he came in that fight respectably. He blitzed Luque right off the bat. He hit him with some good punches, took his back for a brief moment, but he had a pretty big adrenaline dump and then was quickly finished off in that fight. I forget what it was. A big right hand, I think, dropped him, and he was just finished pretty quickly. So I think that Krantz also showed he has a lot more to show than what he showed in that debut. He came into that fight short notice, had some early success, probably had a huge adrenaline dump. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You could see him 2 or 3 minutes in that fight, and he's huffing and puffing. Meanwhile, he's fought the full 25 minutes before, and he's looked great. A 25-minute wrestling battle with James Nakashima, a very skilled regional fighter. So Krantz on the feet, not the most technical, but he does explode with some big, powerful shots at times. And Song's defense is not the best either. I think that Krantz has a good chance at touching the chin of Song, but the biggest advantage I think that Krantz will have in this fight is going to be the ground. He's a black belt, as I mentioned before. He's got some pretty decent takedowns, back takes, and submissions. I think that Krantz would be wise to start to look for the takedowns in this one and try to exploit Song's ground game. And if Krantz is able to get the takedowns, I think he should coast to a decision and possibly even get in the submission. And if Song is able to improve his defensive wrestling over the past few months, and he comes into this fight ready to stuff takedowns and outstrike Krantz on the feet, maybe he's diversified his striking a little more outside of that right hand, worked on checking leg kicks. I don't know, it's a lot of improvements for Song. I just mentioned 3 things, and that's takedown defense, boxing defense, and leg kick defense. 3 things that he's all struggled with. And his boxing defense isn't too bad. It's more so the fact that he doesn't have many consistent tools on offense that he can go to besides that power right hand and the occasional body kick. So on the feet, I think this one should be close. Song is the more technical striker, but his pace has not impressed me, and I don't think that he will be able to keep up the striking enough to keep Krantz off of him. And I think Krantz will eventually close the distance, get the takedown, and get his grappling going. So the pick is going to be Krantz by 3rd round submission in this one. The next fight takes place in the women's flyweight division, and this is the first fight on the main card. We have Yanan Wu, who is 10-2, taking on Mitsuki Inoue, who is 13-5. The opening betting line for this one was Wu as the favorite at -135, with Mitsuki coming in -105 the other way. And that line has since flipped, and we are now seeing Inoue -140 and Wu is +120, and I think this is the right side of things because I'll keep this one short. I don't think it needs too much analysis. Wu has been very unimpressive so far. She only has 1 win over an opponent with a winning record, and that was Lauren Mueller in her last fight, and that fight was just so sloppy. One of the worst technical or worst skilled fights in the UFC I've ever seen. Wu's striking is just super awkward, untechnical. She doesn't throw anything crisp. Everything is thrown wrong. I don't know who taught her striking. She looked very uncomfortable in the clinch versus Lauren Mueller. Looked like she had never really spent much time training there. And she got taken down, but she miraculously pulled off an armbar off of her back, which just shows how bad Lauren Mueller is more so than anything. Gina Manzia was able to outclinch and take down Wu repetitively. She got smashed with ground and pound for most of most of the rounds of that fight. So besides that miraculous armbar that she pulled off versus Lauren Mueller, Wu has really shown me nothing impressive in the UFC so far, or any of her MMA career, because she beat a bunch of 0-0 fighters to get into the UFC. Meanwhile, Misuki Inoue is a very legitimate, established fighter. She's been fighting in Invicta for years. I believe she was a champion in that organization before. She has 5-round experience. She's very technical. She's got crisp striking. She's got very technical boxing. She's got good in and out movement. She's well trained, and she's got the ability to hit takedowns. She's got great arm bars and submissions of her own. She just beat Viviana Pereira in her last fight. And she really impressed me in that fight. Her hand speed, she was able to hit takedowns, avoid submissions, even threaten with her own submissions. She's got great subs off her back, triangles, arm bars, and she can threaten with submissions from top position as well. So Inoue is just a better fighter by far. I honestly would cap her at minus 200 more so. The only reason you're seeing this fight be close is that Wu is going to have a pretty big size advantage in this one. I think she's got like a 7-inch reach advantage, or 7-inch height advantage, which is going to be huge. And we might see the betting line move in Wu's way after the weigh-ins happen and people see that big size advantage. But, you know, size advantages are a pretty big myth in MMA. The smaller, more technical fighter often beats the bigger fighter. And we saw that a few weeks ago. Manny Bermudez lost to Casey Kenny, even though he had 19 pounds on him, because Kenny was just a better grappler. It didn't matter that he was 20 pounds heavier than him because Casey Kenny was the better fighter. So I think we see Inoue overcome that size difference. Wu has no idea how to use her size advantage. She doesn't throw a jab. She doesn't throw front kicks, leg kicks. She doesn't get top position. So I think Inoue will probably dominate this fight. She will outstrike Wu on the feet. She'll probably hit takedowns, and I see her eventually submitting Wu with an armbar in rounds 2 or 3. So the pick is going to be Inoue, and I'm happy to lay a few units on her money line because I think there's a ton of value on it. The next fight takes place in the featherweight division. We have Zheng Liu, who is 18-6, taking on Mosvar Evloev, who is 11-0. The opening betting line for this one was Evloev minus 270, Liu plus 190. Right now we are seeing Evloev minus 700 to Liu plus 500. So a ton of action coming in on Evloev, and you might wonder why, and it's because these two gentlemen have fought before, and Evloev was able to win that fight. Now, a few things about that fight. I did watch it. I do have some notes on it. It is on YouTube if you'd like to go and watch it yourself. It was contested over in M1 in the mountains of Russia. It's a cool venue they have over there. But Liu was not afraid to grapple at all in this fight, and he was actually the one who initiated the first takedown, and he was able to get a few minutes of top position. Actually, he was able to scramble on top position, but the referee stood them up after a few minutes. He wasn't really working from top position too much, but the referees in Russia are notorious for standing people up very quickly. And the second half of the fight, though, Evloev just took over. He got the takedown in round 1. He got the back take, and then in round 2, he got an early takedown and proceeded to just cruise on top for the rest of the round. And Liu defended the takedowns. He was not totally dominated on the ground, but he was just 1 or 2 steps behind the entire fight. But that fight was 3 or 4 years ago, and since then, Evloev has made his UFC debut. He picked up a decent win against Choi in his last fight. On the feet, I think this should be a pretty close fight. Evloev is not the greatest striker. He does have decent boxing, but he's really looking to grapple for the most part. And Liu, I think, has very good kicks and pretty good footwork and distance management, but I just don't see him being able to avoid the grappling exchanges in this one. Now, Evloev did not look very dominant in his first fight against Choi. A lot of that fight was contested against the cage, where Evloev was in top position. He wasn't in the more dominant position, but he was not in a super dominant position like mount or side control. He was not really able to flatten Choi out for the entirety of that fight, so it was not as much of a dominant performance as you think. So with this fight being a few years later, with it being 3 rounds this time instead of 2, I think it's possible we see a little bit more of a competitive fight. And that first fight was not so dominant to the point where I think Evloev is a deserving minus 700 favorite in this one. So the betting line value is going to be on Liu in this one. I think he has a decent chance at maybe getting up from the takedowns, maybe getting on top position again like he did in the first fight, and just making this a closer fight than people are expecting, because plus 500 is a massive underdog. And as we saw last week at UFC 241, the plus 600 underdogs do win in MMA sometime. Anything can happen. So I'm still favoring Evloev because he's simply the better grappler. I don't think he's declined since the first time they fought. I'm sure Liu has improved, but Evloev has just been getting more and more MMA experience as well. He's gotten his feet wet in the UFC while Liu hasn't, making his UFC debut. So I think this fight is closer than the betting line is indicating. I'd cap Evloev around minus 300 or 400 instead of minus 600 or 700. So slight value on Liu in this one, and maybe he gets that crazy knockout before Evloev can get the takedown. Maybe he pulls off some crazy reversal and gets on top and maybe gets a finish. But I don't see Liu winning by decision. So it's going to take a pretty big miracle for Liu to get the underdog upset. So the pick is going to be Evloev to get it done by decision. The next fight takes place in the flyweight division. We have Mark De La Rosa, who is 11-2, taking on Kai Kara-France, who is 19-7. The opening betting line for this one was France minus 320 to De La Rosa at plus 240. Right now we are seeing France minus 190, De La Rosa plus 165. So much more action coming in on the underdog Mark De La Rosa's side in this one, and rightfully so. I think that this is going to be a closer fight than plus 200. So happy to get on De La Rosa at plus 200, which I did for a little bit, which I will recap all the bets at the end. I think that Kai Kara-France has been a little overrated so far in his UFC career. He took Elias Garcia to a decision in his first fight where he looked good. He showed some power in his hands. He showed some takedowns, some top position in that fight. But Elias Garcia was a gentleman that Mark De La Rosa was able to finish. Mark De La Rosa rear naked choked him in the second round, which is probably one of De La Rosa's best wins in the UFC so far. On the feet in this one, I think that Kai Kara-France should have a pretty decent advantage because he's the much better boxer, and De La Rosa has not shown much great striking in the UFC so far. De La Rosa is much more of a grappler. Most of his wins are come by the way of rear naked choke, and that's where this fight's going to get interesting because Kai Kara-France also likes grappling. He likes to hit offensive takedowns. He's got good scrambling ability as well. But France has been submitted before. He has gotten dominated on the mat by Alexandre Pantoja. And I think that that's where Mark De La Rosa has the best chance at winning this fight because this fight should end up on the ground. It's flyweights. These guys are super quick, and both of them like to go for offensive takedowns. So I think this one will end up on the ground, and that's where it's going to be really close because France was not able to keep top position on Paiva. It was a very scramble-filled fight, and Kai Kara-France was put in some bad positions in that fight, and I think that De La Rosa could possibly capitalize on some of those bad positions and maybe get Kai Kara-France in a submission of his own. So I have not been totally blown out of the water with Kai Kara-France so far. I don't think that he deserved to be more than a minus 250 favorite or something at the beginning, but ultimately I do think that he will win the fight. I think that he's got the better striking, and I think that he is going to be good enough of a grappler to avoid the submission of De La Rosa, possibly even end up in top position himself on the ground. It should be a really fun scramble-filled fight, but I think Kai Kara-France will lose very soon in the UFC. I'm just not sure Mark De La Rosa is the one to get it done. He's a little too one-dimensional with the submission really or bust. I think that is his only path to victory for De La Rosa's submission. Maybe a chance that he keeps top position enough to get a decision in this one, but I see the Kai Kara-France winning a decision in this one by mixing up his boxing. getting the occasional offensive takedown, avoiding that submission, and winning rounds in this one. So where the line is at now, it's getting close to being playable at Kaikar France. I would cap Kaikar about -175 in this one, De La Rosa around +150. So the early action coming in on De La Rosa was right at 2-1. I do have a bet on him myself at 2-1, despite him thinking he's going to lose, but we're just playing the value in this one. So it should be a really great fight. The flyweight fights are always great, but I'm going to pick Kaikar France to get the decision victory in this one. The next fight is the co-main event of the evening. We have Zaleski dos Santos, who is 21-5, taking on Jingliang, who is 16-5. The opening betting line for this one was dos Santos, the favorite, at -285, to Jingliang coming back at +205. And right now we are seeing dos Santos -280, Jingliang +240. So this line has had two-way action coming in on it, but I'd say the more action coming in on dos Santos' way. And I think that's the right side of things in this one. I think dos Santos just has too many advantages in this fight. Jingliang is a good kickboxer. He throws a lot of power. Not the best chin, though. He gets dropped in just about every single one of his fights. He, especially in the first round. The first round, he's super chinny. His boxing defense is not very good, so that really worries me about Jingliang. He's never been knocked out despite getting dropped very frequently, but he's been hurt multiple times. I mean, he got dropped by Zawada. He got dropped by Matthews multiple times. He even got hurt by Daichi Abe. So Lee's striking defense is just not very good. His offense is great. He's got great kicks, leg kicks, lead leg kicks. Actually TKO'd Zawada in his last fight with a turning side kick to the body. And Jingliang actually gets better as the fight goes on because he gets dropped in round 1, but he stays in the fight, comes back in rounds 2 and 3, has good cardio, and will outstrike you. He's done that to a few opponents. But Zaleski, he's, a perplexing fighter. I was super high on Zaleski until I just rewatched a few of his fights, and he has good explosive bursts of offense. He'll throw a big, powerful combination of punches and kicks, or he'll throw a flying knee or a spinning kick, and those are really good, but he kind of unloads and reloads in like a Yoel Romero type of thing, where he throws big power combinations and then he won't throw anything for 20, 30 seconds, and he kind of waits and waits. He would really benefit if he developed some straight punches and some shots that he didn't throw at full power, because he throws 100% into everything, and that's a big detriment of his. Because if he gets into a firefight with Jingliang, that gives Jingliang his best chance at winning. Lee's best chance is to touch the chin of Zaleski in a crazy brawl, because both these guys kind of like getting in brawls. So it's possible we see the two of them throw down. But I think Jingliang has been not chasing the knockout as much lately. I think he's been turning into a little more of a calculated fighter who still struggles with the defense in round 1, but he has looked good in the later rounds. He's outstruck guys in a very, I keep using this word, but calculated way. He has been using his energy efficiently. He's not been getting gassed out like he was before, losing fights that he was winning. So I think Jingliang is improving big time. He has insane recovery too when he gets dropped. Like, he'll get dropped and he'll be back on his feet or recovered in 10-15 seconds. So it's going to take a lot to finish Jingliang. That's why he's never been knocked out. He's only been submitted. But good thing for Zaleski is he has a great finishing ability, whether it's knockouts with flying knees or spinning back kicks or punches as well. He also has a great submission game. That's how he got his last victory. He was taking on a talented striker like Melender. Probably could have stood and traded with Melender on the feet if he really wanted to, but he took the path of least resistance, got the early double leg takedown when Melender swung a wide shot, took the back, and eventually got the rear naked choke in round 1. So I think that Zaleski will probably look to get a submission again in this one. Maybe hurt Jingliang with a punch on the feet and look to get the submission, because when Jake Matthews hurt Jingliang, he was able to get mount and he was able to take Jingliang's back, and he had some good opportunities for submissions. He just didn't have the ability to execute them. But I think Zaleski does have the finishing instinct and the jiu-jitsu to finish Jingliang in those type of exchanges. So I think the two of them will trade in round 1. We're probably going to see Jingliang get dropped like he always does, but I think Zaleski has the finishing ability and the jiu-jitsu to be able to get the submission in this one. We might see Jingliang touch the chin and knock out Zaleski early as well. We might see the typical Jingliang where he gets dropped in round 1 and comes back in rounds 2 and 3 and wins on cardio and striking. And he really does have some pretty decent fight IQ, with sticking his fingers in people's eyes and stuff like that. He's really a dirty fighter, Jingliang. He'll do anything he has to win in this one. So where the betting line is at right now, I would not lay the money line on Dos Santos, no doubt. It's just way too high of a price tag. I would cap Dos Santos around minus 225, somewhere around there. But Jingliang at plus 240 is not a bad bet. He'll fight for your money for sure, and it's going to be hard to beat Jingliang in China, and especially on the scorecards. So the pick for this one is going to be Dos Santos by submission in round 1, but it's a very close fight. It should be a fun one, and it's dog or pass where the betting line is at now. And that takes us to the main event of the evening in the women's strawweight division for the championship. We have champion Jessica Andrade, who is 20-6, taking on Weili Zhang, who is 19-1. The opening betting line for this one was Andrade, the favorite, at minus 200, with Zhang, the underdog, at plus 170. Right now we are seeing Andrade minus 185, Zhang plus 160. So two-way action coming in on this fight. I'm actually surprised at the price tag for this one. I actually cap Andrade more of a minus 300 or so favorite. I think that she has a big advantage in this one. I think it's a little too soon for Zhang to be getting thrown in here. Only 3 UFC fights, has not looked absolutely sensational in those 3 fights. I was impressed with her. She's a very skilled, well-rounded martial artist, but I would have liked to see her get some 5-round experience, maybe fight a fighter in the top 10, something like that, before she gets rushed into this title shot. Tisha Torres being her best win before this title victory. It's a little bit of a head scratcher, and it's because Namajunas wasn't ready for the rematch, and there was no real other contenders at strawweight, so they gave this fight to Zhang. They needed the headliner in China, and I completely understand why they gave her the title shot, but that does not change the fact that I still think it's too early, too soon for Zhang, and that she will lose the fight. And there is massive betting value on Andrade. I think that there's just too much going for Andrade in this matchup. And I'll try not to ramble on about it too much, but Zhang is going to be the better striker at range. She has great kicks. She's got good distance management. But her boxing defense and her footwork has not impressed me. She's gotten hit with some shots before. She had a competitive fight with Torres, although she did win it pretty decisively. But the fight that worries me the most is the Danielle Taylor fight. She got tagged by 3 big overhand rights by Danielle Taylor in that fight, and a few of them look like they stunned her at the end of round 1 and the end of round 2. I think that she was rocked by the overhand rights of Danielle Taylor, and all 3 judges actually gave Danielle Taylor round 2, so they scored that overhand right pretty decisively, as they should, because it looked like Zhang was rocked. So she might take the end of the round off. She hears that clap at the end and she thinks the 10 seconds are over. She needs to be ready to fight the full 5 minutes of every round, especially against a dangerous pressure fighter like Andrade. So I think Andrade is going to be pressuring her like crazy. She's going to be making sure that Zhang doesn't have that range to kick. Andrade's game, everybody knows it. She's the female John Lineker. She marches in throwing bombs. She throws big head hooks, overhand rights. She digs to the body. She marches through any damage you throw at her, and she'll come back and throw it just as hard as you. And in round 1 of the fight versus Rosa Namajunas, she was getting lit up with jabs and straight punches, and she got dropped by a counter knee when she was coming out of the pocket with her hands down. Namajunas looked like an elite level fighter in round 1, but that did not matter, because in round 2, Andrade kept up the pressure. The pressure started wearing to Namajunas a little bit, and eventually Namajunas' Kimura takedown defense stopped working, and Andrade picked her up and slammed her on her head, knocked her out in the second round, despite being down round 1. I mean, she was Andrade was a plus 400 underdog after round one, and she came back and won in that round like it was nothing. It looked like she barely got hurt. She just has insane recovery, insane pressure, insane cardio. She's going the full 5 minutes as well. She's got great ground game. She dominated Claudia Gadelha on the ground, ended up in top position, smashed her with ground and pound, left her a bloody mess. So Zhang has some decent trips, decent takedowns, decent top pressure. She can hit a submission as well from the ground, but that's not going to be enough for Andrade. I mean, she's already fought some of the best grapplers in women's mixed martial arts, and she's beaten them. She's dominated Claudia Gadelha, as I just mentioned, who's one of the highest level female black belts of all time in WMMA. So, Andrade, she just makes no sense as a fighter. She is brute strength. She doesn't have much technique. She's just raw power, aggression, and pressure. But it works. She's the fucking UFC champion. She's not very highly skilled. I'm not talking shit on her because I'm actually amazed and a fan of the way that she wins. Rose Namajunas was so much better of a fighter than her, but she picked her up and dropped her on her fucking head and knocked her out. Like, it defies logic. It defies most of how MMA, should work. But Andrade pulled off the victory in that one. So in this fight, I just don't think that Zhang will have the footwork or have the power of her own to stop Andrade from coming forward, because it takes a Mack truck to knock out Andrade, because she took a massive amount of damage in round one versus Doug Rose and still came back and won the next round by knockout. So I don't see Zhang having the power or the finishing ability to knock Andrade out in the first couple of rounds, and Andrade's pressure is just going to wear on Zhang. Zhang's going to be constantly on the back foot. She's going to be getting hit with big power shots, going to be getting hit with powerful leg kicks, maybe getting picked up and slammed on the ground like Andrade likes to do. Andrade has good takedowns, top pressure, ground and pound. She's really just a beast, and I have a hard time thinking about any woman on the roster who can stop Andrade at the weight class. Maybe champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk could redo that performance that she had against Andrade when she beat her a few years ago with that incredible takedown defense, footwork, and striking. But I don't think that Zhang or any other female at this point in the UFC has the striking prowess, the takedown defense, the footwork, or the power to stop Jessica Andrade, that bulldog that Jessica Andrade is. They really should call her like the Brazilian bulldozer or the Brazilian bulldog or something like that. I don't know what her official nickname is, but it's hard to explain how I think that she's going to win this fight. Like, I'm not going to pick us, obviously with pressure, and that's how she's going to break on Zhang, but she can just win in so many different ways. Who would have expected that she would have picked Rose Namajunas up and slammed her on her head for a knockout? Like, that's a legitimate path to victory now for Andrade. She can just pick girls up and slam them on their heads. So I think eventually the pressure will wear to Zhang, and around rounds 2 and 3, I think we see Zhang wilt, and Andrade gets that barrage of TKO finishing. Zhang just has not been in the deep rounds before. She has not had championship experience. She's not fought the type of fighter that Andrade is, and it's just too much too soon for Zhang. I think the UFC is making a little bit of a mistake in this one, rushing Zhang in there. I'm not even going over a path to victory for Zhang. I did mention earlier trying to knock Andrade out in the first round or two, but I just don't think she has the power or the finishing ability to do that. So I'm not giving Zhang much of a chance in this fight. I would be absolutely shocked to see Zhang win this fight. I think that Andrade, I would cap her closer to minus 350, minus 400, giving her about 75-80% chance to win the fight. So there's massive line betting value on her. I got about 3 units on her. I will probably add a little bit more later. Got a unit on Mark De La Rosa. Got 2 units on Mitsuki Inoue. Might add some units to Derek Krantz because I think that he has a good chance of winning that fight. I'll add some units to Anthony Hernandez. I'm just tracking to see where that line goes because the price is just getting better and better on him. We got a unit on Jung at plus 235. Got a unit on Moises at plus 300, and a unit on Alateng at plus 125 as well. So got a lot of action on this card. Might add some more later. I will update you guys on my Twitter or my Bet MMA page where you can see all the bets posted. But that is going to do it for episode 73 of the Martian MMA podcast. This has been the analysis, prediction, and betting discussion for the UFC Shenzhen card going down this Saturday, starting at 3 a.m. Eastern Time, 6 a.m. main card start time for all 12 of these fights. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and I will be back next week before UFC 242. Peace.